How many tracks are there in the game? I mean, do you have a nice little number to sort of roll off, or?
Well, I know there's 26 original songs from Combi Christ, and then Noisier, I don't know how many exactly, but it's a lot anyway. There's a lot of original music in there. It's getting close for between 3 and 4 hours of original music. So,
with that collaboration with Combi Christ, how have you guys sort of talk to them about? I mean, have you brought them in to show them like cutscenes to give them elements of how the theme of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we try and integrate them in the game development process as much as possible, get them on board early as much as possible, and that's one of the good things about Ninja Theory is as a studio they understand very clearly the importance of having audio involved at every stage of development. So composers are involved right at the start, they're part of the concepting process as well as everything else, and and they get as much material as we can show at them, send them. So they get video captures of the game to work to. We would be in touch on Skype every day. I mean, Comic Christ is in America, and Noisier in Holland, so it's not possible for them to be sort of visiting too often, which is a shame. But still, we were just in constant contact whilst they were working, so constant feedback, and it was very much like working with people in the office, really. Yeah. We just say, okay, we're working on this chapter together, and it was, it's a very sort of fluid, collaborative process.
3 hours or so, or 2 or 3 hours worth of cutscenes in this game, I believe. Is that wrong about this thing? It's almost like there's a whole movie in there.
Yes, I don't think that. No, the minute count is. I think that's more like an hour and a half.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering that in terms of scoring a cutscene versus trying to implement musical score into sort of like dynamic, evolving gameplay. What are the two? Is there two distinct sort of approaches you take to doing that?
I think, well, the approach to composition is very much not thinking about the technical side of things, and we definitely like to make sure that you try and throw away as many of the technical constraints as possible. And I think writing interactive music as opposed to writing for a cutscene, both of them have got their own challenges. With interactivity, the challenge is really making sure that you've got enough link to what's going on, but still enough freedom for the composer to write a piece of music that isn't going to get interrupted at the wrong time. Whereas with cutscenes, the opposite is true. You've got that sort of minuscule level of control, but then you've got something that already has its own time frame, and so you've got to fit to that very, very closely. But the thing that makes it work isn't necessarily obeying any of those technical rules. The thing that makes it work is just getting understanding of the narrative and the characters and the gameplay and how the player's supposed to be feeling. And if you can get those things right, then the technical things sort of just kind of fall into place themselves. So yeah, I don't know whether one's more challenging than the other. They just have sort of different skill sets and different requirements.
With obviously this being a franchise that's been going on for quite some time now, did you approach or have a look at, listen to any of the previous game scores just for any influence, or did you say just clean slate?
Yeah, we did. We played the original games. We had a listen to the stuff that we, and I think in terms of attitude and design, we sort of considered what the reasons were for them making design choices that they made. So rather than sort of saying, okay, well, we want to sound like that, we decided, well, we're reworking the soundscape completely, but we still need to be true to the reasons they decided to do certain things. So there are very clear decisions made about the design of sound effects and the implementation of sound effects that are very core to the gameplay experience, and those things are very dear to Capcom's heart as well as ours. So we put a lot of effort and time into making sure that you get a very good level of integration between the sound effects and the combat, for example. So you can read the combat just from an audible perspective. You should be able to tell what enemies are doing what to you at what times. So there's a lot of subliminal information that you'll get from the audio, and I think that's always been the case with DMC games. They've always been very much about the sort of fluid combat experience and being able to sort of interact intuitively with the combat and work out what the enemies are doing to you. So it was more about sort of working out their implications and, well, working out their intentions when they were making those decisions and then reinterpreting them our own way.
Talking about the sound design and stuff like that for the weaponry and stuff, how do you correctly interpret using a pair of mystical gauntlets to punch a demon in the face?
It's funny. The gauntlets specifically have although, you know, yeah, on the face of it, they sound like some sort of crazy, fantastical thing. Actually, there's a huge amount of cultural reference for all of these things, and that cultural reference exists in the history of game making and film. So, although you'd think you have the freedom to go anywhere, actually, there's a lot of preconceptions about how you expect it to sound when a massive fist hits something in the face, and there's quite a lot of, you just want it to go. Part of you wants that, you know, you want that Street Fighter-esque kind of response. So, you know, we're always sort of trying to take it into a sort of a more sort of over-the-top, exciting realm, but we still need to be true to those sort of cultural expectations.
This might be a bit of a toughie, considering the amount of work you've put on this project, but is there any particular favourite piece, or maybe a particular moment during the production that you can pick out and go, you know, I'm really proud of that, or I really enjoyed this particular thing?
Definitely. I think for me, like, what I really enjoyed about the process of finishing this game is we did a large post-production mix. I spent 3 weeks mixing the game at what's it called? Real World Studios. It's Peter Gabriel's studio. It's near Bristol. We had a guy with us, a sound engineer, re-recording mixer, and a sound designer who's worked on all the Harry Potter films, and we had a great time working on the sound and just shaping it. That's the point at which you get to say, okay, we've done a hell of a lot of stuff and we've been frantically making sounds and putting them in the game. Now, how do we really sort of engineer them and polish them and make them fit together nicely? And we had quite a different sort of attitude towards mixing to the way we've done previous games, because with this game the music is very much a front and center part of the mix. It's loud and it's full range, and it takes a lot of mix space, so we had to account for that. And so we use techniques which mean that certain sounds will take chunks out of the music at various different times, and we've got sort of subtle ways of doing that and more deliberate ways of doing that, so it allows you to have, the music's always got its power and scale, but at the key points all the sound effects have still got their space as well. Okay, so this is the state-based system that the music runs in. So essentially you can say, okay, I'm playing music from the succubus fight, and I can choose to play, okay, let's start off the fight here. Hang on. Now when we're running the music, we've also got this, we're using this technique called side chaining, which is sort of very prevalent in dubstep music and all kinds of sort of electronic music at the moment, which is where basically one sound will sort of take a chunk out of everything else. So when you hear one sound play, it's a certain volume, and it'll just pull the rest of the sounds out for a bit. So you get that sort of slightly pumping kind of feeling to the mix, where you can hear like a kick drum or a snare drum making everything go like that. But obviously DMC is a combat game, so the things that are driving that side chaining, they're not kick drums or snare drums, they're the combat sound effects in the game. And these combat sound effects have this effect. So this is what happens to the music when you make one of those loud combat hits, but I'm going to do it so that you don't hear the hit, you'll just hear the effect it has on the music. So there's a tonal change. It's quite subtle, and there's also a sort of a volume change as well. So you can hear these sort of little chunks being taken out of the music. Right. But the thing that actually makes those happen, and I hope this is making sense to you so far, it all makes sense to me, but is when you play a hit sound. So let's try one of these. So yeah, this is just the sort of standard Rebellion hits an enemy. So the point of that is, it doesn't feel like anything's ducking bits out of the music. You don't notice it because there's a sound effect in its place, But the effect of it is that because the music's just ducked out a little bit, you've got space for the sound effect to play. So if you were to do that without that technique, then you end up with a mix that feels really cluttered, and the sounds sort of layer over each other, and it just turns into a big mush. But having this technique means that we can make the mix sound really sort of, it's dynamic and it's adjusting to the sort of sound circumstances that are there. So it just makes this combat more satisfying ultimately, because those hit sounds all have their sort of nice contact kind of sound effect, if you get what I'm saying.
Good. I finally have your attention.